No one owns the full picture.
Who do you think should own that?
Real ownership, that should be a common behavior in every single company. The openness and the willingness to change.
Would you say that is one of the biggest opportunities with regards to workflow automation? Or are there others that you see within the value chain?
This is for me something which has a very big impact. Time and money, right? The real end-to-end visibility, not about the shipment, but about
Hello and welcome to The Boiling Point, your go-to for the cold truth on the cold chain and all things temperature-controlled logistics. No hot air here. I'm your host, Ilya Preston, co-founder and CEO of PAXAFE, and today I'm pleased to welcome Rouven Dochtermann, COO of tempmate. Rouven helps lead tempmate, a global IoT and cold chain technology company operating in more than 90 countries. He has spent more than a decade working with pharma, healthcare, and logistics teams, helping them move from reactive firefighting to proactive supply chain control. On today's show, we're going to get into excursions that point to deeper problems, data that gets trapped into reports, and the missing workflows needed to turn visibility into action. Rouven, welcome to The Boiling Point.
Hey Ilya, thanks for having me today. Great to see you.
Great to see you as well. Thanks for joining. All right, so Rouven, before we get into the big questions, give our audience the quick version of you and tempmate. What does tempmate do? Where do you sit in the cold chain ecosystem? And what do you personally spend most of your time thinking about as COO?
Right. So yeah, as you already mentioned, I'm Rouven. I'm COO of tempmate. I work since a decade with tempmate. We are a German company based in the south of Germany, and we do almost 70% of our business in the pharmaceutical industry. Since I joined tempmate, I passed the entire areas of business development, sales, and project management before I became the COO of the company next to our owner, Andreas, who is the CEO. So tempmate builds mainly cold chain monitoring solutions. We're more than 40 years in the business now, coming from hardware, more and more moving into software and services for pharmaceutical companies, healthcare, and food and logistic companies. Per year, we secure more than 1 million shipments across 90 countries. And my personal background is I've studied electrical engineering. Optimized it more into a sales related role. I wanted to work with people more than only with a product. And that gave me a very system oriented way of thinking. And I don't just look at individual problems. I try that the company look at the structure behind every problem. So that's exactly what drives my personal role. And I try to turn the strategic approach into execution for our organization. And as an organization, we try to act always outcome oriented. What does that mean? So everything we do is on customer-centric basis, because we would love to support our clients to change their general behavior whenever we detect that we have an idea with our good intentions to optimize their workflows.
1 million shipments a year, operating in more than 90 countries. It definitely sounds like you guys are doing something right. So congratulations on the success.
Thank you.
All right, so time to turn up the heat a little bit, Rouven. What is one cold chain problem you thought was just the cost of doing business early in your career until you realized it essentially didn't have to be that way?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I studied electrical engineering, and I've been in different businesses before. So early in my time in this industry, I had a very naive perception. Okay, excursions happens, product loss and damage is in transit is usual. It's good that we document it, and then it's about to move on, right? So it felt for me kind of an, let's say, accepted reality on both sides, on the customer side, but also on the other side of the table from a vendor's perspective, right? From a company providing solutions. And to be honest, that has been for quite a while my opinion. But what changed my perspective was a pattern I kept seeing across dozens of projects I've been involved, because I slowly recognized data, a lot of data is given. Devices record everything, job. And so finally the sensor did the job. But at the same point, I recognize that information and data is not automatically provided to the right person or to the right persons at the right time. So we as a company started more coming from a hardware side, thinking what can we do to help and support that this lack, this gap is about to be filled. And then that was finally where it became more clear for all of us to close the gap between data capture and decision making. So this is where we as a solution provider try to think day in and day out in building new solutions instead of just, let's say, monitoring tools.
No, I love that. That's certainly a gap between data capture, I think, and decision intelligence and action. Certainly, I don't think there's a shortage of data in the industry. I think one of the things I find fascinating certainly is that over the last decade, we have so much more technology, right, in the form of devices, in the form of visibility software, risk management software, even decision support software. But the issues have not gone away. Product loss ratios keep going up. They keep getting worse. The inability to make decisions in real time, it has not subsided either. And so, from your perspective, when you think about this industry and you think about one of the key pain points of this industry being temperature excursions, do you view them as the problem or do you view them as symptoms of the problem?
For me, it's more a symptom of a problem. If I think about the excursions and I see the entire circumstance, that the roles inside an end-to-end thought and a value chain, let's say so. For me, this is really simply said just a symptom, because if you see a pattern that a shipment arrives, a passive logger is about to be pulled, PDF data is about to be archived somewhere, and so it's more of a filing of data somewhere, compliance is done. But for me, that has nothing to do with controlling the problem. It follows just a dedicated pattern. So if a framework requires, for example, that you have a proactive risk management, an assessment, that you consider what can be done, I ask myself why it takes so long that different organizations try to optimize that in a faster way. If you ask me, the entire thing is too slow. What do we see? In my opinion, if we think about, or coming from a hardware perspective, hardware is for me becoming kind of means to an end. It's a part of this entire supply and value chain measuring. So the logger itself is no longer a real question. What for me matters more is what to do with all the data being around everywhere. And because we have temperature data, which give us a value, but the value alone is not a basis for making any decisions, optimizing workflows and processes, being ahead of something, so proactive instead of reactive.
So to that point, I mean, the industry, cold chain in general, right? You're looking at life sciences estimates $40 to $50 billion in product costs each and every year, and that's fairly, I think, underreported. That's not a popular statistic within the industry. In food and beverage, it's multiples of that. It's $800 billion worth plus of food scrapped because of cold chain failure. Do you view these temperature related issues in the supply chain, whether it's in transit or warehousing or storage, do you view these as preventable? You mentioned proactivity, right, and the ability to act ahead of time.
Yeah,
a lot, because they're taking a status quo by like financial teams and CFOs in the industry. They're kind of taken as a built-in loss, right? But do you view them as avoidable?
Yeah. So for me, is that the common behavior is entirely too reactive, and what we see more and more, going really into deeper discussions with our clients after consulting, that there is a clear yes that excursions can be prevented on different layers. But if we take this $1 billion loss, my perception is that we are not losing those billions because of a technological miss. We are losing them because, let's say it in easy words, because no one owns the full picture. And taking this into account, if we look at the typical supply chain, we have carrier data, warehouse data, and warehouse systems, QA platforms, TMS systems, which is good. Similarly, other companies have CRM systems, they have other tools in place, but everything is about to be set up as a data silo, separated from each other, maybe with some integration. But in my personal opinion, the real end-to-end visibility, not about the shipment, but about the entire value stream, it's not been given in a way as it could be today.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense, right? And to your point, even if something is integrated, you have different data schemas. You have, the normalization of data requirement. You have conflicting sources of truth, where you have devices telling you one thing, carrier milestones telling you something else, multiple devices on a shipment, right? If you don't have that unified shipment record, I agree with you. It's very difficult to get to that source of truth. Who do you think should own that? So who do you think should own that unified kind of source of truth? Should it be the LSPs? Should it be the device provider? Should it be the pharma companies? Who owns it?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. I would say for me, there is not a general, this party should own it, but there must be a decision who owns the data and who takes the responsibility. We have currently different projects going on where a pharmaceutical company has 3PLs, 4PLs in line doing jobs for them, and always the question, who takes care about this general data? If I would have to make a decision and I would be a pharmaceutical company and I have different stakeholders and service providers collaborating with me, I would love to own those data. I need to be ahead. I need to have the full transparency, and I have to make sure the data I need will come and flow into my system. So that gives me the opportunity to really own an end-to-end process within an, let's say, operating system.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And then not to forget, we would have clear role definitions, clear responsibilities, real ownership. And that is nothing we just see within a pharma supply chain. That should be a common behavior in every single company.
100%. I mean, it's never a good position if you're, I think, a pharmaceutical company to come in to QBR and ask your service providers how they are performing, right?
Exactly.
And then get, 3 different data points, and those data points are not standard amongst the service providers, and it makes decisions very, very difficult. I agree with you. It goes back to the whole bottleneck of decision making. I think this next section, and I hope you're ready. It's time to get a little fried from your perspective. But what would you say is a widely accepted cold chain practice that you believe is outdated, inefficient, or actively holding the industry back?
So we speak about, let's say, trends, right? So if I actually look into what makes a difference and gives real outcome is, and what we see also as a feedback from different clients, is predictive analytics in general, also taking into account historical data to learn from the past, moving forward into the future. So to have this as a backbone of everything we can do and decide in the future, to become from estimation into predictiveness, number two. So meaning that if you have enough shipment data across, I don't know, different lanes, carriers, seasonality, devices such as tempmate devices or others, packaging types, etc., you can learn from those patterns and you can make it become like your given standard and fundamental. So because there is questions like which route is consistently borderline, which carrier shows small deviation, do my devices work properly? All this knowledge will help you in audits, risk management, planning, but finally also negotiations with your collaborating partners. Second, I think a shift from documentation to evidence. Like if we have seen for a long time that monitoring was primarily a compliance exercise, yeah, PDF, a signature, and something was done. So what we see, what changes more and more, is that data is becoming kind of a legal evidence, and faster. It needs to be there faster. It needs to be continuously available. So when was a box opened is something we could assure today we can use as an evidence. Who took responsibility at what point about that shipment? Those topics are becoming more and more interesting, and we're able to provide those precise data. So what then finally brings me to the point of the third trend I see is AI, which you can see everywhere today as an operational layer in your day-to-day business. But I have a but in this answer, and it needs a very solid data foundation. Otherwise, you make an investment into a tooling without a real outcome and benefit. It will just be another tool in your stack providing you output, but not real outcomes.
Yeah. I think a lot of the things that you said kind of have the same underlying theme with them, right? Like the first thing you mentioned, feedback loop. So feedback loop that's systemic, that flows back in with real world data into your planning process, AI, and AI enabled workflows. All of these things can only operate if you have the proper infrastructure.
I can give an analogy which is not on pharma supply chain, but which is, I would say, comprehensive for everybody. If we go on LinkedIn or wherever, we see all those AI labs promoting their tools, right? And companies are investing into AI as a tool. Then you can use your chat window, and all the time you can write your dedicated problem and you will get an answer, which is good. This is output. But what if you give this system a context layer of different skills, of SOPs, of an agentic system, of a knowledge, how do we act, who we are, what is our team speech, let's say a context layer. And you are able that those precise data can be called off. And whenever an adaptation is needed, you come to a point of a self-maintaining system, optimizing continuously. This is the exactly same thing we can see on implementing an AI tool such as ChatGPT or whatever it is, and what this industry should have as well.
Absolutely. No, couldn't agree more. I think you've already partially mentioned it. Despite all the different solutions and better sensors, better platforms, more data, why do you think we're still losing so much time and product in cold chain every year? So, like, what do you think is the real bottleneck? I know you mentioned kind of like the decision silos and people not having one entity kind of own the data and the responsibility, the accountability that comes with different aspects of the value chain. But are there any other things that you can think of that are bottlenecks?
Yeah, I see different. To be honest, I see different bottlenecks. But for me, it's really first also three things. Let's say so. Number one, I would say first and foremost, integrated data foundation.
Mm-hmm.
We need to know where are our data, what is the quality we need to have the data, that they are accessible
Mm-hmm.
as a single data point to establish real intelligence. Second, we need to have a governance setup that we're able to have an end-to-end accountability. And third, which is, I think, maybe the hardest part. This is my perception also within our company, the openness and the willingness to change. If we are used to something, we try to keep it as long as possible, running as long as we don't see any problems occurring. So the question is, how big are the problems? And sometimes I have a personal feeling that as long as it is not too visible, we keep on going.
That's right.
In my world, I would love to speed that up.
Because as you know, what's the most dangerous phrase in business? We've always done it that way, right?
Yeah.
The worst, the absolute worst. With regards to decisions and unlocking the decision making, where do you think most teams get stuck when trying to turn all that data from the cold chain into faster, better, quicker, more actionable decisions?
Catching up on a couple of points I already mentioned is I don't think that those companies or teams have problems on a technological stack.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's more that it's so fragmented and siloed that it does, simply said, maybe not exist for them. So decision making is so widely spread. And now imagine those big organizations. And where I can see that very often is whenever there is an excursion, how long it takes to release a shipment. And we speak about weeks here.
Yeah.
And if I take this into account, that automatically brings me to two very critical points. Number one, if a shipment stucks, that automatically has impact on inventory, stocks, and cost. And number two, it automatically hits working capital effects. So if we can reduce times here, only time, I do not say reducing teams, just time. This is money.
Absolutely. And so to your point there on workflow automation, digitization, the ability to accelerate decision making. I know Tempmate has been thinking about a lot of these things with Chaingr, which is something you recently had announced. Without going too deep into the product or turning this into a product pitch, what problem is Chaingr trying to solve?
Yeah. So as a bit mentioned, and looking back on the analogy I brought up with the AI tools, the idea is that all relevant data have to be at one dedicated spot as a reference, as a contextualized reference. Second, we want to make them accessible. And to be referenced when decision making is relevant. It doesn't mean that we need someone in the loop to do that. So we can come to a point where we get proactive advice or even instruction. We could become free of human in the loop in technical, but of course we have to respect a framework. So taking this, we would like to automate processes, especially recurring tasks and exercises companies have to do day by day, just spending time doing that, and to assure that also human failures in the loop are avoided, as the system can do exactly the same job more precisely 24/7.
That makes
And
sense.
doing this inside a system, we try to consider all data, as said, temperature data, humidity data, lights, carrier milestones, etc., bring them into one system and contextualize it to everything which has been agreed in an SOP.
What I know you mentioned, like the product disposition, right? The product disposition process and how long it takes to release a product from a quality perspective. Is that would you say that is one of the biggest opportunities with regards to workflow automation, or are there others that you see within the value chain?
So for me, now quality related people will maybe close their eyes and say, oh, that's maybe a weird answer. But if I have a clear regulation and I can reference accurate exactly to that regulation, and I have the contextual data about a dedicated product, what it means in terms of stability, I can assure that I have a continuous record about what was going on. Whereas the difference that a system can tell you go or no go, or a person need to do this job manually to say, okay, it's good to go. So this is for me something which has a very big impact, time and money, right? If we then look further and we see moved shipments or shipments in transit as such, we have so many different stakeholders inside this system where you have other points in this entire value stream or supply chain where we should have an eye on to optimize that. It comes to, we saw years ago heavy problems occurring on shipments to South America, to Southeast Asia, especially on humidity. Forgotten shipments on tarmacs, etc. People have been happy to understand that there was an excursion. Wow, pretty good. But they have not been able to really pinpoint where it exactly happens and then to sustainably change this process. But that would also be reactive. What if we can make this become a continuous standard?
Yeah, almost like a flywheel. Continuous.
Exactly.
All right, time for my favorite section. We call this cold, warm, or hot, where you basically tell me if you are cold, warm, or hot on each specific item. Cold being you're pessimistic, warm being you're neutral, and hot being you are super optimistic about a particular initiative. So I'll throw out a trend, and you tell me where you land. Keep it quick, but keep it honest. So first one, real-time IoT. So the actual
hot.
Okay. And any context there?
As mentioned before in the previous context, it's kind of a fundamental need if we would love to move forward. I think the most critical part is that the technology is, in terms of pricing, becoming cheaper. Yeah. The sooner that happens, the faster passive data devices will disappear.
Well, that kind of leads me to my second point. Passive loggers going away or still very useful?
Yeah, I think they will stay for quite a while on very sensitive industries right? Which are very price sensitive. But to be honest, for me, it should speed up, and we should get rid earlier than later.
Makes perfect sense. How about AI agents in the cold chain? Are they ready to change workflows and modify workflows, or is it still conference stage hype?
So agentic, as in general, super hot topic. If we see cold chain, it's, in my perception, getting warmer. Same answer. I think we have a very big chance to optimize. And my belief is companies who start to use it and rely on that earlier will become the successors.
100%. And then finally, data ownership. Is it an underrated problem, or has it already been solved?
Yeah, as we are a European company, and there is something called compliance and GDPR, et cetera, this is really a topic beginning on each conversation with companies. How about data and data ownership? So in our case, it's warm to hot.
Okay. And these are obviously the hot talking points in the industry today. I'm curious, if you look 5, 6, 7 years ago, there were very, very few of us that were talking about these things in the industry, at least with regards to AI, workflow automation, data silos, decision intelligence. Now, everywhere you look, it's like decision intelligence, AI, and most of it, as you know, is smoke and mirrors. How do you, if you were a pharmaceutical company, how do you separate signal from noise? How do you kind of determine what is real versus what is marketing?
Yeah, I think as a pharmaceutical company, it may require more and more that you have also teams working continuously on those technological topics. What is possible today? Where can we gain the biggest benefits and outcomes, right? So they should have the knowledge, because what we see is the educational part. I call it the educational part about what can be done, what is possible, what is the advantage doing so, is very time intensive.
Yeah.
And that means we should shift a bit our perspective on what can really make the difference, instead of only focus on what we do in our day-to-day business, because those are more long-term related decisions on an entire operation.
Totally agree with you. I think it's also really important for the pharmaceutical companies to really go deep into the nuance of capabilities. So at a high level, at a 50,000 foot level, you could look at a number of solutions in the market. Let's say, hey, visibility platform, right, or visibility solution. Check mark, check mark, check mark. Great. That everybody has visibility, dot on the map, location, and condition. But if you really look under the hood, and if you start going into the use cases for pharma specifically, tying multiple devices to a singular shipment record, having real-time and passive devices, having shipments with 50 devices or 100 devices, and having the ability to process that amount of data. I think it's the educational component of really understanding the universe of use cases and then going deep into those with each and every provider. There is devils in the detail in these things.
You're absolutely right. I do fully agree. If we see, especially on the software market, there are different solutions, and there are always these buzzwords going on, but it's about that dedicated use case for a particular business field, right? And if you make those investments, they are so long-term that it makes sense really to make the difference and to follow the nuances, as you said, right?
100%. 100%. Rouven, tell us about, I guess we want to learn a little bit of lessons from the fire. So tell us about a moment when a cold chain decision really mattered. So what went wrong? What did the team do? And what would you do differently today?
As me personally, coming from tempmate, I could maybe better explain a quite good story from a customer of us, right? So we always try to act as a consultation company as well. So we want to understand how processes look like, not only selling devices which are part of a supply chain, but I remember the other story of a customer who is in the clinical trial, so heavily regulated, being compliant, and they were shipping extremely sensitive and extremely valuable shipments. So it's been passive shipper boxes, 50 times 50 times 50, and the goods have been worth approx 30,000 euros each box, right? So how they treated their behavior was not a single traumatic failure. It was generally more a structural problem they used to have. So they were using classically passive loggers, expensive ones, manual to operate, and the critical part of the logger was in the hands of the recipient at that point, right? So when something arrived damaged at the recipient, there were things going wrong along the way. So the problem here was no real data point where it happened, the documentation gaps.
Yeah.
So how about the handover moment? They couldn't say more, just damage and losses. So the question is, when did it happen? At our end, in transit, at the recipient hands, and that was the moment when we came in. So we were starting to discuss with that particular client. We sat down together, we analyzed their different scenarios. This special scenario, because there was a dedicated eye on that one, we analyzed them, and we built for them a solution package which works end to end. So the first thing we did, we changed from a passive device to real-time devices. But that was not like the entire game-changing moment. The devices they were using were pre-programmed, they were pre-registered to their platform, so no more manual workflows per shipment. And then the real value came by adding the software stack on top. So the real-time data inside the software, which brought them into the position to have a predictive analysis option that they have in the future, historical data where they can rely on, and they can follow anomalies, right? So bottom line, the entire system gave them the opportunity whenever the handover was going on, the sensor said light. So they knew exactly the moment when the recipient opened the box. As a result, they achieved a really remarkable benefit. They saved more than 1 million euro each year only on that particular use case, and that's been one use case out of different, right? And bottom line, the passive logger data, the data loggers have been more expensive than a shipment as such, based on real-time devices. So that was a pretty cool story because the decision maker was super happy, and it was a project moving forward, building this trust, also validating that they can use this to rely long term on that. And that was a pretty cool story here I could mention.
Yeah, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing. To wrap us up, leave our listeners with one piece of advice. So for the pharmaceutical leader, whether they're in supply chain, planning, logistics, operations, quality, if they're trying to modernize the cold chain, what is one thing they should do differently this year?
I think they should really start focusing on how they can assure that they have one point of interest where all data comes together and that they assure that they can contextualize these data to come to a clear outcome-driven decision-making immediately, not retrospectively.
Couldn't agree more. Because otherwise, what's the point, right? If you're not able to utilize that, that's essentially what you're paying for. If you're paying for devices, if you're paying for IoT, you're paying for decisions. You're paying for data.
Yeah, the question at a certain point is it better that I understand that I used to have an excursion once it arrived, or even in transit, not to stop it? Because this is what we've been able to do for years now. A dot on a map, there was an excursion, and I knew it before, but I was not able to do anything at all because there was no context. There was no data merge going on. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the next level of optimizing a value, let's say a value chain.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. You and I are speaking the same language, sir. So, Rouven, this was fantastic. Thank you for joining the Boiling Point and for giving us the service provider view of what is really happening between the cold chain data and cold chain decisions. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I highly appreciated that.
For sure. To everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. If this conversation hit a little too close to home, that's probably the point. Cold chain does not need more noise. It needs better decisions. So subscribe, follow Tempmate and PAXAFE, and stay connected for more honest conversations with the people shaping the future of cold chain logistics. Until next time.